learned how to change it yesterday.
These are bulldog chairs, right?
Yeah, someone kind of taught me that.
You go clockwise or counterclockwise?
I think you go counterclockwise.
I was wondering, I was in the library and the chair really looked like a lowrider. It was
Right? Yep.
Are you actually having success?
Don't start yet. That one's way too low. Hold on. I think there's a pre-game one.
Well, it teaches humility having a chair.
That's true. There you go. I'll hold one side, you get the other. Two more.
It only takes 3 people to get these chairs up.
Exactly. Collaboration. Collaboration at its finest. There you go. So much better now.
I ran into someone yesterday that gave me the dirt on the law schools in LA.
Oh no, the secret's out?
What about us? No. What did I say? Was it me? I don't remember all
Just
the
help me keep straight who was who in law school.
How did Pepperdine sort out in that analysis?
That was like the
You hit the picture blank button?
it's like the Hawaii 5-0 gang, you know, on the beach.
Oh, that's right. Where all the, yeah. There you go. Where all the law schools.
Can you try your mic? Can you try your mic? Is it on?
Yeah, sure, why not? Move it, I'll bring it along. It'll be fine. Someone will promise that.
I know.
We don't see enough of our colleagues.
I know. I had
You do, so it's what's it takes?
Do you have local comrades?
Record. We are recording, and it is also on YouTube Live. It's their account. It's the Cali account that we're using.
Oh, that's right.
Not through the school, but it's their account that we created.
We're literally,
We're hooked up to it.
we almost are an
Record
island.
live.
And on the right day, we may be an island.
That's true.
Is that feature available for regular accounts? Through their
But,
account. Not through the school account.
there are literally 2 rows.
Our personal account is Google.
Like Bro
You
Family.
know, you can hang out.
Yes, right.
Family hang out, but I'm not sure.
I-5, come down I-5.
Yeah,
I've got a cousin in Long Beach, right where the,
Oh, you could go down a cruise? Oh, yeah.
so we just went into Long Beach and then just wanted out on this. But I think it was like 405. Yeah. It was like super
Nation's
narrow.
largest parking.
Oh, we were flying. But it was like a ride there. It was this way, so I think they were making those nights that they were big compressed on the
You didn't even know that? You're an LA person like for a long time, right?
6 years now. Long enough. I like it. I actually do like LA.
Where'd you come from?
Overseas. I came back to the States and studied.
So you have an international perspective.
And I'm gonna stop.
What's that?
I know you're restricting violence.
Okay. Oh, that's about as, to get the board and you in there, that's about as far you can go that way. Okay.
I'll line myself up as a person as my outer
on an updo today, I could be right in the shot.
You're right at the bottom there.
See, that's the danger of having Oh. Sounds like a story.
Yes, they got me that far. No, because it took a lot out of them to get me that far. They had to resort to shots to get me that far. Yes. Actually, that's what happened, pretty much. It was pretty funny.
Aaron, did you get your streaming going?
That's what it felt like.
Yeah, because it takes a minute to come up, start streaming. Okay, good.
Megan, you were not on the airbag.
No, we were not.
It's one of those things I just remember, it's like, okay, by the end of this, I can be super dry.
Never heard of any
Oh, really? Sounds good. Fun.
Hope he's not giving you any trouble.
Not often. Not too often. I think I give him more trouble.
Is,
Oh, they just like that's like he's a top line. Yes, he was at the back of the trees and he had like steered through
Not
you shouldn't be in that part.
He and I have.
The receivers are in the rack. The clicker should work automatically.
No, it's just I was using one of
He's a
the
good guy. He just has a lot of restraint. And I don't think
so finally
no,
said,
don't
switch
do that.
the battery sucks on. Because it's 5 years old.
They're working?
Oh, yeah. Oh, oh, good. Yeah, we're good. Because everyone's got to know no problem. Come back the next day. After drinking with me. I'm a little proud of him.
This is just an interim method.
How's your evening?
You go ahead and take pictures?
So I have all these shelves in my
Yeah, oh, no.
which is the address. Like how much you pull, there's 60.
Good idea. Because if we ended up with bookshelves in it.
Oh, my word.
So,
Oh, bad.
the old kids there.
Well, I have them and we separate them out with my substitute.
Where did it come from? Where did it come from?
Well, when we get new ones, let's say say that we have to have conditions on the shelf, we throw that out to the 6 conditions.
I did that with my own. I ended up coming in. They only put that in somewhere.
So I love the day when we had a bathroom. Sitting there, do something. You just joined us. You're looking for something to do.
It's not cool. I hate that.
Yes.
I do hate that.
Yeah, he's big.
But it's something that our, and
It's
just,
the wrong year. I'm just judging everyone.
I know what it has.
Yeah.
I like the whole.
Rocket.
I was just shocked.
Exactly. It's the best part of this hat. Yeah, because as he said, the ponytail, you know?
Go on the ponytail right through the back.
Yeah, that's what I usually do.
Yeah.
I'm
Me
not
too.
planning on wearing it.
We're going down after that.
When you watch the
Bangs are in this season.
That's what this says. It says, at the bottom,
I was working on the world of
it's sartorial
Take the personality.
never had you can't buy a car.
you know, I can actually hear the
Or demo.
Well, I'm not being
Absolutely. Nebraska. Yeah, we got out of the chapter about 100 years ago.
My mother was under 5'1", and I'm the tallest girl in the family. I weighed 5'2".
I'm the same, yeah, I'm the same height as my dad. The guy who happens to golf with accents, those people were just, or I
Well,
like.
are you needing an extra one right now?
My Android isn't talking. I just need to see if we'll see it. Ad hoc Wi-Fi.
And the rest of you are 5'2" and up.
Don't look at all the pictures. Some of those are for reminders.
Not for reminders.
Still under the seat in the auditorium.
It takes several attempts. Yeah, I'm in between phones. I haven't logged into Cali.
Yes.
I was going to leave it. Just go.
Yeah, my wife's iPhone Wi-Fi just died on it. The Wi-Fi and all.
The radio's bad.
I tried to do the Apple Store here and yeah, it's out of warranty. It's $200 to get fixed. So So like, you get a really good view of what your iPad
A really good deal on a non-functioning Wi-Fi.
The 3G works fine. Wi-Fi.
I think I'm moving on. I probably won't make it past the same
No, but you think you have the camera.
last time I figured it out. And I'm like, hey, so what's going on with this thing? Like, you know, it's all. Very helpful.
Oh, we use the video.
Ready?
Good morning. Good morning. Holy, there are a lot of you coming this morning. I was saying earlier that having gotten my presenter's cap, I am now business on the bottom and monster truck rally on the top, which is what is known as the sartorial mullet. I'm going to turn to all business, but hopefully be a bit entertaining while I talk to you. My title in typical sort of grandiose Cali style is what we and better yet our students have learned from using all the toys in the toy box. I am positive that there are people in this room who will have shinier toys, better toys, more toys, and hopefully we'll have enough time at the end to talk about them. You know, the tendency in titling these Cali presentations is to go big, but I want you to know that it's tempered with some amount of realistic expectations. So, a few backgrounds. First of all, Introduction to Legal Research in Maryland is a mandatory class, like many other places. What is not as usual about the University of Maryland Francis King Carey School of Law, or Carey Law as we like to call it for shorthand, is that advanced legal research is also a graduation requirement. So our students, most of them come in knowing that this is something that is, they're not going to sort of learn it and forget it right away. Some of them do come up to you at the end of class and say, oh, I just found out advanced legal research is a graduation requirement too. I worry about those students. So it's taught in the second semester.
I think your microphone's off.
Is my microphone off? It hasn't been turned on. It's supposed to be on. Should I just carry it? Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to carry this thing. Ooh, I don't want to do that, but okay. So the other thing about this class, or one of the other things, is it's taught the second semester of the 1L year. Now, most places, including the institutions that I went to, teach introduction to legal research in the first semester of the first year, and we feel that that kind of puts students at a bit of a disadvantage because they're doing all of that beginning learning, what is the law, how do I issue spots, you know, all of those really basic tasks. They have a little bit better handle on it in the second semester, so that's why we teach it then. It's also taught for a half semester. And historically, and also today, it is taught as what we would call a semi-flipped classroom, where you still do some amount of in-class lecture. So that's sort of a little bit of background. Well, that also creates some challenges. The half semester 1 credit class, as with many legal research classes, signals subtly to the students, this ain't so important. We also have a history of kind of minimal in-class interaction. All the students are in the same sections that they were in the first semester, and they all know each other pretty well, but they don't know us. The library faculty were very unknown quantity as far as they were concerned. So they were hesitant of speaking up and hesitant of even interacting with one another. So we had some challenges to overcome. So we're going to do this presentation as a bit of a choose-your-own-adventure. I'm going to want to get volunteers from the audience to say what you want to see first. Hopefully we'll get through all of it. If not, I'm certainly available afterwards to talk about whatever we didn't cover, but I think we will get through all of it. Any takers for a first? Yes, ma'am?
Videos and quizzing.
Videos and quizzing. So, and I forgot to prompt my links here, so they might take a little bit of time to load. Historically, we have done videos with screen capture using either Captivate or Camtasia. I'm a bigger fan of Camtasia personally. And Camtasia 8 brought with it a bit more of a quizzing capability. So that enabled us to ask questions of the students right in the middle of the presentation. What I tried to do with a lot of these is do less of parrot back to me what you just learned, and a little bit more of take a couple of the things that you've learned from this previous portion of the video and synthesize them. You know, take it a little bit further. Why do you think this is true? So I'm going to show you just a little bit of what some of these look like.
In this presentation, we'll look at how cases are published and how to find and select cases on a legal issue using headnotes.
I won't subject you to them.
Looking at the overall legal research process, we can see that searching for cases is an important part in the search for primary law for several reasons. First, there may not be a governing statute in the jurisdiction.
Okay, now that we've had some loaded, I want to point out a couple of the features of Camtasia. One of them is that you are able to get a table of contents. And once the video is loaded, it keeps helpfully moving aside from me. As you can see, it's loading on the bottom. Once it's loaded, you can jump directly to those various sections. Now what we'll do is we'll go to one of the sections that has a quiz embedded in it.
Is a leading case, which is older, and which all recent cases seem to cite. If there is, it's
The baby is the new
that
case.
as well.
The older gentleman is the leading case. So it pauses, you take a quiz. The best case is one that comes from the U.S. Supreme Court, concerns similarly situated parties, that is within your jurisdiction, has been cited in various law review articles, or is the most cited court case of all time. Any takers? B. You submit the answer, you view the answer, correct. So this is a couple of things. It both reinforces something that they have already learned, or forces them to think a little bit further about what they've already learned. This is more of a regurgitation question. But it also gets the student out of, okay, I gotta sit here and watch this thing. Okay, is it over yet? Mode. They get a little bit more interactive with it. Now this particular tool that we were using is a bit in its infancy in terms of how we've been using. We've been using screen capture a lot. And we haven't just been using screen capture, by the way, to do enhanced PowerPoint slides. We do a lot of delving right into the tools themselves, showing the various aspects of it, using the zoom pan and a highlight in order to say, here is where you find the table of authorities. Here is where you find this thing. This is the search bar where you enter your keyword searches, to really kind of help them to focus in and out on both the big picture and then to find the specific tools. What's next? I feel like I'm facing a bunch of one else. Yes?
In-class exercises.
In-class exercises. Now this is possibly the oldest of our tools because we do a semi-flipped classroom, hence the upside-down students who are, don't law students get younger every year? So this is an example of one of the exercises. And it's probably too dense to read. I will supply the slides to Cali if you want them, and I know that my colleagues would be happy to share the actual exercises. One of the things we did with our in-class exercises is we tried to make them very, very step-by-step. Go and find this. Look up this in that in the early stages, where we started with the secondary sources. And as we moved through the semester, they got more and more open-ended. You know, not look here for this, but go and find some authority So case law on this. What were some of the keywords you used? Where did, what secondary sources led you to case law? What parts of the secondary sources were you looking at? Here's my mic, it was a little alarming. So we really tried to do the baby steps first and then ramp it up to a more choose your own adventure kind of thing. The other thing about doing this in class is we assign students into small law firms. So we had them work together. And one of the things that did is that some students already had some experience.
Are you sending them to just Lexis and Westlaw, or also some of the free law sites?
All of them. Basically, a lot of people tend to send them to any specific tool. We say use what tool works and hop between tools. We really encourage them to start with free law, to start with, especially with Google actually, and Google Scholar, and then to move towards the pay-to-play tools. We don't emphasize the free law or fast case or anything like that as much as we would like to, because it's a half semester. And we don't want to overwhelm them with dozens of platforms. So and what we're trying to do as much as we can is to sort of teach them like librarians and say, this is how you find things in general, and not so much, here's how you find this on Westlaw, as much as we can. They're kind of resistant to that. They really like to be binary. They want to say, where do you find it in my favorite tool? But one of the things that happens is that since these students are kind of working in law firms, especially when they're working on their own laptops, is they will use different tools. They're familiar with different tools. They're familiar with, some of them are familiar with Bloomberg, some of them are familiar with Lexis, some of them are familiar with Westlaw, and they will kind of turn their laptops to one another and say, oh, but I found this on X tool. And the other one says, oh, I found something similar on Y tool. How did you find that? And they start sharing information, which, as you know, with law students, it's really hard to get them to do. But this exercise helped them to do that. Next. Coming from the front of the room, I've got all my gunners in the back. You want to spin the wheel. Okay. This was, I should say, by the way, my colleague Camilla Tubbs, you might have noticed, was originally on the bill to be here with me, and she abandoned me for the best possible reason. Camilla got married recently, and she's now on her honeymoon. So, wherever you are, Camilla, I hope you're having fun. But she thought, I don't think she'd been to Cali before, and she thought that we might need an icebreaker, so that's why she put this slide in here, spinning the wheel of instruction, and it actually goes to the Socratic method, because we actually did not completely abandon the Socratic method. Does people still use the Socratic method in this room in teaching legal research? Hands? Anybody? One? Okay. We did try to engage in the conversation, and certain of these techniques actually really assisted in that. Certainly, the in-class exercises helped them to start talking to one another a little bit, and because we assigned them to their law firms, we didn't let them pick. We had students working with one another who weren't necessarily as comfortable with one another as they might have been, but that helped them to get to know one another. Hopefully, we were not as terrifying as John Houseman's character, by the way. One of the things that I always say to my students is, this is where you get to be stupid. Being stupid here doesn't cost money, okay? And they kind of laugh nervously. I say, seriously, save space. Be stupid in here. Don't be stupid when you're using something that costs money. And the light goes off, and they kind of get a little more relaxed about it. I say, you're not going to be penalized for asking a question that you may think is considered to be stupid. It is not stupid. So that helps to loosen them up. And getting them to talk to me and to one another, well, all of us to one another, is really a great aid in understanding, and also understanding that their colleagues, their classmates, don't already know everything. I think a lot of law students come into law school and they think, I'm the only one who doesn't know everything. And they find out swiftly that they're wrong. Another one.
Student narratives.
Sorry?
Student narratives.
Student narratives. Oh, this is one of my favorites. So, one of my colleagues, Susan Herrick, a few years ago, interviewed a bunch of students that had been in her classes, and her idea was that the students would describe a legal research project from their summer job from beginning to end. And these videos, in a way, were great. Students were really interested and really interesting, but the narratives themselves kind of dragged on. The other thing is that serendipitously, every single student wore gray, tan, oatmeal, beige. And so I looked at, and we didn't really use them very much because they weren't as engaging as they might have been. What I did was I re-edited these particular videos so that it highlighted specific types of legal research. So when we covered secondary sources, we had a video where the students talked about the secondary source aspects of their legal research project. And we had headers, or what are they called? 2/3, the little thing down at the bottom. Lower thirds, thank you. That explained who the student was and what their job was. Because they were all doing really different things. Some were working for public defenders, some were working for prosecutors, some were working for private firms, some were working for, health organizations. So they were doing all kinds of stuff. The other thing that happens here is that these students and their narratives really gave our students another idea that I don't have to know everything right away. Now I've linked this and it's supposed to jump right into an area of the, okay? It wouldn't be Cali if there wasn't at least one glitch, right? Oh, that's fine. All right. This is very sad because, and I'll have to supply this link later, because the particular spot in the narrative that I had was a student who stops everything. She goes, and don't ever cite to Google or Wikipedia. And this is coming from one of their peers, okay? All these students have said, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm a second-year law student. Hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm a third-year law student. Hi, I'm so-and-so this. And so she's going along, and she's very professional, very conversational, very sure of herself. And she says this thing, she says, I know you already know that, but I'm just telling you again. And that makes a bigger impression on the students than us saying the same thing 15 million times. And I'm assured that nobody gave her $1 to say that. Later on, in a lot of the narratives, the students say things like, well, the first thing I did was I went to the library and I talked to the librarian because I didn't know where to start. And I always make the point, we didn't tell them what to say. These are their stories, okay? So having that perspective of previous students is very, very helpful. And I've been working on a project to update these where the students are wearing color. I actually specifically said, there's something a little nice, a little bright. I put them in my office. They're not against a blank white wall. So hopefully that will be able to be updated. But it's a really, really powerful tool for these students to be able to see, oh, okay, I'm not the first person ever going through this experience. Okay, next. Yeah?
Low voltage tech.
Low voltage tech. This is one of my favorites. It's very surprising. Print. We actually increased our teaching of print by 100% this year. We used to teach one class, had an aspect of print. We used to do state statutes in print. What we were able to do was write a single problem and then assign the students to various jurisdictions, send them down into the stacks, and I used to say, you're going to Alabama, and you're going to Connecticut, and you're going to Delaware. And they would get an opportunity to, start to work with indexes, start to look at the structure of how these things are put together. And this was exceedingly valuable because, we all hear stories about, that just sort of blankly say students don't know how to use print. Sadly, it's true. The secret is they're open to it, okay? I was teaching a Blue Book exercise the first time I ever taught this class. And I had a couple of nice young ladies sitting in front of me, and they were just opened the Blue Book kind of at random and started leafing through it. And I said, you might want to use the index. And they flipped to the front of the book. And I remember saying to a colleague of mine, you know, telling her the story, and she's just, I can't believe they don't know this. I said, stop. I said, we just need to teach it to them. They don't know it. They're not going to start knowing it just because we're ticked off at them for not knowing it. How would they know it? We had to be taught it. They weren't taught it before. So we can't take it out on them that they don't know this stuff. So the next class, and this is something I've carried through in all my classes, I come in, and that happened to be the state statutory exercise where using indexes is absolutely vital. I came in and I did a little stand-up show and tell. I said, okay, thought experiment. You are an attorney opening up your solo office in Ohio. Your first client walks through the door and she is a tattoo artist. So where do you find an index in the back of a book? And a couple of people were like, back of the book, right? And I said, where do you find an index in a series of books? Literally, I saw panic, okay? I said, it's okay. It's its own volume. I pulled out the Ohio index. It's its own volume. I said, where do you think you would look in this volume for information on your problem? And again, silence. And I said, come on. This is not a trick question. I'm not hiding the volume. It's okay. Somebody said, tattoos? So we go through the process, and I had scanned that portion of the Ohio index, and another slick part of that is it's near things like syphilis in the index. So it really gets them like, oh my God, you know, kind of loose and laughing, which I find humor to be helpful. Not only in getting them to trust you, but also in them remembering things. It's actually been proven that humor increases the ability to remember. I won't tell the stories from the bar exam review class that I took where various of the review professors used humor, and I still remember this really useless stuff. So we do have a guide to legal research on our website. This is just a piece of it. And the thing is, we don't just say, use print, right? We also say, here's a statistic. More than 50% of firm lawyers report using print materials regularly for research. And we make the point to them that their bosses for this foreseeable future are even older than I am, and they're really comfortable with print, and they're sometimes distrustful of electronic research, and that these people are going to be your bosses for the foreseeable future. And we appeal to their enlightened self-interest and say, if you have some comfort with print, and you are displaying that to an older attorney, they are going to be more comfortable with you faster. And I have actual anecdotal proof of this. I was sitting at the reference desk before my colleague Camilla joined us. She had come from Yale, and she was in her sort of gap period. She had left Yale, but she hadn't joined us yet. And one of her former students was trying to track her down to thank her for teaching him how to use a pocket part, because it had wildly impressed his assigning partner that summer. I tell my students the story, and they all go, really? Really? Oh, okay. All of a sudden, they're open to it. And because we give them 2 shots at this particular apple, we actually saw students using print a lot more in their final papers than we ever had before. You know, they were comfortable with the print indexes. They were going to the online indexes in the electronic tools a lot more often. They were exhibiting sort of a greater freedom of movement outside of what they would term traditional keyword searching, right? That's their tradition. So we also gave them this article to read, or at least read part of, Think and Practice Like a Lawyer, Legal Research for the New Millennials. And I don't know, can you all read this? Because I hate reading from slides. But I will if I have to. Can you? Yes? Mm-hmm. Yes. Excellent. So, you know, we basically put them on notice that here are some of the pitfalls in moving real fast in doing online legal research. And we still saw a lot of students who were, basically found an only marginally on point Supreme Court case, but it was from the Supreme Court, so they cited it instead of the better authority that was from lower courts. So we still have a ways to go here on either side. But we put them on notice that this is out there and that firms and other schools recognize that this is a problem. Other review exercises. This is also an older technique that we used. We actually we used Blackboard. And while I really dislike Blackboard personally, it does have a couple of neat tools. One of the tools that it has is the ability to create sort of online tests that are a little bit more sophisticated than what you can do in Camtasia. I'm really hoping that the video quizzes end up sort of upping their game a little bit. I have to say that mostly these are really good for simpler multiple choice kind of exercises, although we have used them to do like miniature essays and then compare your essay to the sample answer essay. This also counted as part of their class participation, part of their grade. And this is one of the questions, primary, secondary, binding, or persuasive. They have a real hard time sorting through these concepts. So we spend a lot of time both in class and in these exercises making sure that they grasp these distinctions. And we like to show them real screenshots too, because especially when you're dealing with the online vendors, a secondary source really looks like a primary source a lot more than it does on paper. There's fewer cues to the uninitiated as to what the source really is and what it means. Down to 2. My goodness, more than 2. Anyone? Cali. Cali lessons. Of course, we I think my notes on this say, duh. Of course we use Cali lessons, but in ILR we don't actually use any of the library of Cali lessons that are on the Cali website, as good as it is. We use a lot of those for advanced legal research, and we actually keep a database of them. My colleague Jenny Rensler keeps a database of the ones that we've sort of looked at and find especially helpful for the various modules that we teach in advanced legal research. What we have done is we've put together some Blue Book exercises that we host on our own servers using the Cali tools to create them because that helps them to walk through the iterative process of figuring out how to construct a Blue Book citation. And this is just one of screenshots from those exercises. And the last one is clickers. So anyone who wants to can go to pollev.com/JASLEWLIB. And I'm just going to actually talk about this very non-legal slide first, because one of the things I've learned is that it's very important to do what I would call a no-stakes slide at the beginning of your presentation. What this does, first of all, is it reassures the speaker that it works. And you're doing it on a slide where it does not matter, okay? By the way, this is not the technology we used in class. We do have a bag full of Turning Technologies clickers that we gave out to students at the beginning of class, but because I did not want to tote a bag of clickers from Maryland to Chicago, I repurposed some of the slides so that you can see what they look like here. The other thing is it gets the students out of passive receptive mode, similar to the videos with quizzing in them. They kind of, sit forward, realize they have to be a little interactive, realize that they have to, they're stepping into this mode where they're actually really are going to be participating, and yet it's a soft participation. They don't have to be called out, they don't have to speak up, they don't have to be wrong, even though it is a safe space, it's okay. And it also tends to lighten the mood a little bit, because quite frankly, the students love this stuff. They really like the clicker exercises, even when they got to things that are more substantive. And so some of the things we use this for, again, is for primary, secondary type exercises. Things that have a right or wrong answer. Very helpful. Very good. Another thing we use this for, and you can also, especially with Turning, you can put right answer indicator in, right in the slide. The other thing this did was, a lot of times with harder questions, students would say, wait a minute, why is that? They would actually out themselves as being wrong. Oh my gosh. And then you could have a Socratic dialogue. Or if you saw that there were a lot of students getting the wrong answer, you could, I've already given it away. If you saw a lot of students getting the wrong answer, you could have a brief discussion about why, right? Because some of these, as we moved along, were a little more difficult. I really, really wish that the second was not picked up, even though it's measured. And lastly, we did this to incorporate a little. You know, some smart Alex in my class also did the same thing. We wanted to make sure that we reiterated some vocabulary. And what that led to was less of what I call flat forehead syndrome, which is where I'm reading a paper and I go, right? When you read a paper and, you know, student says, uses a term very, very, very wrongly, and you say to yourself, where did you get that? Right? Their reach exceeds their grasp sometimes in their writing. And so when you reinforce some of the vocabulary, you help to avoid that. I have a notation that I use in my marginality of my papers. I never let my students actually see the papers, which is inigo Montoya. Yes, and those of you who got the joke, very good. It stands for, I do not think that word means what you think it means. So these helped with some of those problems. We saw a lot fewer sort of reach exceeding their grasp experiences with vocabulary. So having gone through our Choose Your Own Adventure, here's what we learned. First of all, habits are ingrained. Don't fight them, use them. So we have probably in common with many of you, perhaps all of you, say start with Google, go on to Google Scholar, do a soft entry into legal research. Do not start with the big guns. Not only is it complicated, it's expensive. Start thinking about money. It's okay to use some of these tools, but as the student from the video, which you didn't get to see, is never second. Right? They have that message, so we're not worried about them using using Wikipedia as a citation, but we're saying, you know, this is not in many ways as different as some of the research that you've already done. What we're also doing is we're modeling behaviors. I mean, we're big, as many people are, on the 15-minute rule. If you're doing the same thing, using the same keywords in the same database for 15 minutes, you're not getting a good result. Switch, change, ask a question, do something different, right? So we're modeling changing up techniques by changing our teaching techniques. It also identified more gaps in knowledge, especially with polling, right? We were identifying where students were weak in identifying some sort of key pivotal areas that would cause them to go really wrong in their final papers. You know, jurisdiction, primary versus secondary, mandatory versus persuasive, these kinds of things that are second nature to us, but are really new and sometimes difficult concepts for the students. So here's what they learned. They did learn to use different tools. They did learn to switch up. They showed more polish in their papers. This is the best batch of papers that I've seen. They were great. Could just be the particular sample size, could be this class is just an amazing group of students. I don't know. But this year's class did a lot better. They had more self-knowledge regarding their gap, right? They exposed a lot of metacognition in their papers, and they said, I knew I didn't know this, so I knew I had to go out and learn it. And for those of us who are in the sort of library field, we kind of go, yeah, of course you do. But if you read enough of these student papers, you realize that students don't know what they don't know, right? But these students really knew a lot more about what they didn't know. And the last thing was, I had a significant number of students who at least did some print research. They had gotten a little more confident with print research, and they also tended to use these structured tools in the pay-to-play databases much, much more effectively and efficiently. They went for those tools. They went for the tables of contents. They looked at the indexes. They looked at the various tables of authorities. They looked for the popular name table in the U.S. Code. They actually used these tools rather than zeroing straight in on that search box. And that was one of the biggest things that I saw. So I think that continuing to teach print, even if they're never going to pick up another book, which is probably unlikely as we know, had a lot of ancillary utility, even if they didn't use print in their final papers. So, and what that does, I love this quote, Knopfler's quote. And I think we were, again, modeling the learning, unlearning, and relearning, trying to teach students to use databases, looking at it as this is a database rather than this is where you search for this in Lexis. This is where you go to get that in Google, right? They were looking at it a little more holistically. And I think they're a little more open to unlearning and relearning. One of the things I say to my students also is, you're going to learn these databases now, and they're going to change. They look at me like, what? And I say, okay, who here is on Facebook? And they look at me like this. I say, not now. I know you're all on Facebook now. I say, in general, are you on Facebook? And they're like, yeah, I'm on Facebook. So what happens when Facebook changes its user interface? And they say, well, everybody freaks out. And they say, and then 2 weeks later, what happens? Everybody calms down, right? And they just continue to use it, and they relearn how to do things they did before a different way, or they decide that this tool that they've taken away, I guess I'm not going to use anymore, or they figure out a different way to do what they were doing before using different tools, right? You're going to have to continue to do that in your professional career as well. You're going to have to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And with that, questions or comments, or anybody have any other great toys in their toy box that I'm not talking about? I have to say, by the way, I loved yesterday, Roger and Marcia had a great presentation about various social networking tools that they were using. And one of the things that Marcia said was, I don't really get Pinterest for library use. And somebody brought up a great school use, not necessarily library use, for Pinterest, which is to show incoming students some of the things that you can do in that town. They're just, yeah, it's like, oh yeah, that's great. It's not library use, that's that's public affairs or a admissions kind of use, but that's great. Similarly, I think we all have biases against certain tools, toys, or techniques. I have to out myself right now. I'm not a fan of extra normal. But I have once in a while heard people use it to good effect. So I would hope that everybody be open to learning about tools that even that they sort of looked at and sort of dismissed as useless at the outset. So anybody have any questions or different tools or anybody? I did this in 35 minutes.
I have a question. Do you ever find a tool kind of like halfway through the semester and integrate it, or are you like, no, we should probably hold off on this and wait till next time?
Have I discovered a tool halfway through the semester and wanted to integrate it, but decided to do it or decided not to? I have not, I don't think, but the thing about this particular class is that it is team taught. Because we're teaching, 11 at least sections of 25, and we've got 6 or 7 instructors doing it. Changing horses in midstream is a little difficult. If I were on my own, I'd probably be more, comfortable with picking something up and letting it, sail or not. But no, I don't think I've run across anything that I just really wanted to incorporate right this minute. I'm not able to do so. Others? Yes?
Since it's team taught, is everyone pretty much on board with everything you do, or do you ever have to do any selling jobs on these things?
all these different tools, or do we have to sell them to one another? Generally speaking, what we do is we kind of divide and conquer. So I am real comfortable with Camtasia, and I've pretty much taken point on that. Camille's also, she joined us less than a year ago. She's also, really stepped in and done that as well, because it is a lot of work. My colleague Jason tends to do all of the in-class exercises, does all that heavy lifting. So we tend to split along the lines of where we're more comfortable and what we like to do better. And luckily, we're not all saying, oh, I want to do the class slides for the mini lecture. It's usually one person says, I can do that. And occasionally there are jump balls. But mostly, it's not a matter, it's a matter of, well, hey, if you want to create it, I'll use it. Because there's not that much of a learning curve. Yes?
Have you ever had students introduce you guys to tech?
I know I have. I know in my last class I did, and I'm blanking on it. The funny thing I found with students is that they're less technologically savvy than we often give them credit for. There's the occasional ones that are super, super, super savvy, but mostly they kind of come in at a I know how to use Google level, and there is a little bit of the Dunning-Kruger effect sometimes in it. And play the Dunning-Kruger effect, for those of you who don't know it, is people who have very minimal experience in something tend to overestimate their ability. And the more they know, the more they get to a point where they get a little more comfortable and they're able to accurately assess their ability. And then when they get really expert, they tend to underrate their ability because they know what they don't know by then. But mostly, we've had students kind of be like, wow, this is, they're more impressed with the way we're switching things up. And I gotta say, they love the quicker quizzes. Love them. Yes.
What's involved in setting up that poll everywhere? I've been using Cali Instapoll, and I run PowerPoint slides, but just from playing with poll everywhere that you presented now, I can see it as a more powerful tool, but I'm wondering what's the background work for it?
The background work for it is not enormous, I gotta say. Turning is easier and it's more flexible. But Poll Everywhere is fantastic in terms of its sort of basic functionality. You never need to sort of clear it out in the class. You probably still need to do the Cali polling. You need to continue to kind of you can't set
Click
up.
on the screen. Yes, that's true.
I haven't used it in a long time.
What I like about it is the students will ask questions and I can modify stuff on the fly, which is really easy with that. What I really miss, I've used some other physical clippers and I like data reporting. And I'll probably abandon, don't tell Deb, Cali this fall.
Yeah, well, a couple things about the Poll Everywhere software is, first of all, as an educational user, you get 40 responses per poll for free. So if you're teaching a class of 40 students or fewer, then you're golden. The other thing you can do is if you don't want to pay for it and you want to continue to use it, you basically say the first 40 responses are the ones that are going to get recorded. And might encourage them to kind of step up. So Poll Everywhere is great for that because it is for certain purposes functionally free. And you can set up polls in advance. You can record, I believe, I don't know if it's in the free software. I don't tend to record the responses because I tend to want to just on the fly address any misconceptions. But it has a lot more bells and whistles. Can I see another hand? Yes.
With such a short amount of time, how do you handle the tension of teaching the classic Lexis Westlaw interfaces and the new Westlaw Lexis Advanced? Do you switch back and forth, or do you
This year,
stick to one?
Last year we really killed ourselves trying to give them a lot more of the 5 platforms with Bloomberg mixed in. This year we've just moved to the new platforms pretty much exclusively and just teaching Westlaw Next and Lexis Advanced.
How long do you take before you decide whether or not something's working? I mean, you can't always base it on the evaluations that you get from the students, but when you guys sit down and talk about it, you say, let's give this 2 years and let's see if we think it's working, you know what I mean?
The question is for the viewers at home, how long we give the viewer at home. how long we give our student, or how long we give a technique before we decide whether it's working or not. And honestly, it's kind of, we don't sit down and say, okay, we're going to give this a year and see if it works or see if it doesn't work. It's really sort of more of a, we start meeting for to plan the next semester, and we kind of say it's fairly anecdotal, it's fairly loose, and we kind of on the fly say. I don't recall us ever making a decision that it was like yes or no, but it's more, well, actually that worked pretty well, so can we up it a bit? Because all of these techniques are fairly evolutionary in their stages. We've been using the Blackboard quizzes since before I joined Maryland Law. We're using in-class exercises, although not in this sort of a structured format for a long time. Clickers were entirely new this year, but we're always kind of doing a stone soup. Add one of these, take away one of those, up this, down that, making those decisions kind of on the fly every year. But one of the things, I was a hugely strong advocate for continuing to do the statutory print exercises, and this year we also did some secondary source exercises in print. My colleague Jason Hawkins, I got to give him public props for this because he worked tremendously hard on these exercises. Basically sending students for the same problem out to different resources. Okay, you're going to go to the ALR, and you're going to go to the CJS, and you're going to go to this specific legal encyclopedia on this subspecialty, and really giving them that exposure. Because quite frankly, students got up and they got out of their chairs. And it's very collaborative. I mean, students can collaborate with their laptops and they can do the little, what do you think? But when students are sort of working together on a limited resource, 3 students on one book, they have to collaborate, right? Or one person just takes a point, the rest of them sit still. But quite frankly, actually, I was monitoring the stacks and answering questions and helping them. I saw very little of that laying back behavior. And trust me, I can tell when people are so yeah, I was very keen to at least maintain the print training that we were doing, and when we decided to up it, I was actually very pleased. Anyone else? Thank you all so much.
I know who you're talking about. I know her.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, like, what for you? No, but
we haven't really had much. I mean, we have lots of opportunities for use anywhere in the classroom where you kind of like, if you're going to go to PowerPoint, well, not for them. They bring in a laptop, throw it in your and pray they know how to turn it on. That's kind of Whereas we have one classroom that we did a couple of years ago. Just go in, but there's like nothing involved.
Is it like an extra course? You can access all the files on the flash
They
drive?
could, but it's not that easy. Mostly they'll bring a flash drive. And that's probably the simplest, it's like variations. But, and that's probably the way it's going to go. So this summer we're putting PCs in all of them. Yeah, I know a number of folks run into support issues. We're willing to deal with that right now.
Yeah, it's not that hard. I think what's interesting is the faculty, like for your faculty, I would argue with, try to present them with the idea that at least you have all of your stuff. Like that seems to be our biggest thing. They're like, well, I have my flash drive, I've had 10, I lost them all. I'm like, wow, I feel like freak out if I don't have my flash. So it's like a different mentality. But I just feel like I worked on my laptop and then I transferred it to the classroom computer. But it's not working on my laptop. It's like, well, did you know you could bring your laptop to the room and plug it in? Like, oh, really? Does it work with sound? Like, yeah, totally. And then now I've had like at least 3 faculty members start just bringing their laptops to class. Even though the classroom computer has a podium and all these fun things, they're like, no, I don't run this on my laptop. I'd be curious to actually more faculty to find out.
Our lecture capture software based.
Okay.
So having the static PC is going to simplify things.
That is true. Who are you guys with? How do you like them?
It's been a journey.
Yeah.
And we have reached the sunshine spot. So I think it's going to be okay.
Okay. Well, what was the how long have you guys been with them?
Well, we've been in an extended pilot with them.
Got it.
I mean,
Yes.
There's like no comparison.
I want to try that at our place.
I recommend the pilot. The pilot isn't free. I think we spent, I want to say 13 grand for a year pilot, which isn't much. And then the last year, we were like, the first year didn't work very well. We didn't get that many people to use it. I mean, it's not like we're being a burden to you guys. So we went, my colleague at the university actually negotiated a lower rate. We would have this with them. And really, we had a lot of problems with audio video sync. We had a lot of problems with upload times, processing times. It's all hosted. I mean, you can
How would you
have
capture your names if there were no PCs dedicated to that?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes. How hard is that? It's not that easy. So we have two courtrooms and one classroom. And so those